All right, and some injury news today in the NFL. X-rays on Justin Herbert's high ankle sprain came back negative. Now, the status of the Chargers QB is going to be monitored this week ahead of Sunday's matchup with the Chiefs. You can find that on CBS, by the way. Herbert left yesterday's loss at the Steelers after re-aggravating an injury. And that's not the only big names that we've seen dealing with injuries, especially when it comes to the Chargers. Of course, Chargers injuries to their first-round picks. The history is not great. Of course, most recently, before Justin Herbert, Joey Bosa dealing with that hip injury where he did miss some time. Joe Alt dealing with an ankle injury. And then Justin Herbert, of course, with that ankle, something that we'll continue to monitor here on HQ. But in the meantime, let's bring in our injury expert, Marty Jaramillo. We're going to go down the injury list from last week and as we're gearing up for this one. But let's talk about Herbert first, because reports are saying that the X-ray there on that high ankle sprain is negative, which is good news. But regardless, Marty, sometimes, that sprains and things like that can linger. So how much time could he possibly miss by re-aggravating a previous injury that was already a problem?
Well, Jacqueline, listen. After week 3, every single team across the NFL has their share of injuries. And here we are with Justin Herbert. He actually sustained the high ankle sprain in week 2 versus the Panthers and actually was able to complete the whole game. As you can see, sometimes these injuries are all over the place. He did re-aggravate it versus the Steelers, and you saw him limping off on replay. Now, he was seen leaving the stadium in a walking boot, but that begins the healing process. Shut it down, allow it to start to heal and control the swelling as well. So, because he did so well after week 2 and was able to start against the Steelers, I expect him to have a tremendous amount of treatment, probably 2 treatments a day leading into the game versus the Chiefs. I expect it yet again to be questionable. It'll be a game-time decision. But seeing what we saw after Game 2, playing Game 3, I do expect him to play, and I expect him to be heavily taped and/or braced for that game.
All right, we just showed the schedule there. Just a reminder, Chargers and the Chiefs on Sunday. You can find that on CBS. Marty, you mentioned it going into week 4 here. A lot of teams have a lot of injuries that are popping up, so let's get to some of those. Sam LaPorta left the game against the Cardinals with an ankle sprain. He did come back onto the field, but does that give you any more confidence that this isn't going to be a long-term issue?
Well, on replay, while everyone was celebrating Jahmyr Gibbs' touchdown after that trick play, Sam LaPorta was on the sideline, essentially reeling in pain and being assessed by the athletic trainers. And once he was taken on out on the cart, wow, then everyone got very worried for his status. But here's what we know. It's a traditional lower ankle inversion sprain where the ankle rolls over. Always scary on replay, but those ligaments are quite elastic. They stretch, they bounce back, and they seem to bounce back fairly quickly, and more than likely at this point in his career, he's had many of those. Yes, he did come back. He was heavily taped, limped off and on, was kind of ineffective in the second half. But once again, I also expect him to be questionable for the weekend. Treatments every single day, probably twice a day through the week. I think he has an extra day of rest because I believe he's in Monday Night Football against Seattle next up. But I expect him to play. But scary moment indeed. He kind of dodged the bullet there.
Yeah, Sam LaPorta, a reminder, dealing with a hamstring injury in the offseason as well. Let's go to the Eagles because there's a lot of injuries to talk about. Some of the most notable ones, Lane Johnson, Devonte Smith dealing with concussions. And Marty, this is tough, right? Because we know each concussion is so unique. So it's hard to gauge when we're talking about concussions.
Always a serious discussion to talk about with Devonte Smith. We hate to see these late helmet-to-helmet hits. And no flag on this particular play. He laid there motionless for a brief moment while his teammates were around him, supporting him, always moving to see that. And while he was being assessed by the medical staff, he was healthy enough to travel with the team along with Lane. But everything is about today and tomorrow and how those neurological tests are and the results of those to decide on whether or not to enter concussion protocol. Whether it's Lane or Devonte, they would miss at least one game if they do enter. But what you see on replay, both with Devonte lying there motionless for a brief period of time, and also with Lane, it was reported that he was seen vomiting on the sideline and then we saw him being helped into the medical tent. The reason why that's so concerning to see is vomiting and nausea is a textbook sign of a concussion, and both would technically warrant going into concussion protocol. But today and tomorrow, we'll decide with the team. With both the team, their respective teams, and the medical staffs of the Eagles will decide.
Yeah, we saw the receiver room and then just the O-line in general dealing with some pretty serious injuries for the Eagles just in the first half of that Saints game alone. Let's talk about Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold dealing with a bone bruise on his knee. It was a scary moment in that game against the Texans, and he actually spoke with our Evan Washburn about the injury after the game. Let's take a listen.
Concerning moment there in the third quarter. You went down. What happened?
Yeah, I just got tangled up. We'll see. Get it looked at. We'll see.
Were you feeling good as you closed out the game?
Yeah, I felt really good. Like I said, we just got to evaluate it and see where we go from there.
So keeping that information close to the vest, of course, but for some more context, our NFL insider Jonathan Jones reporting that an MRI revealing that he has a bone bruise but no structural damage. So sources telling CBS he's not expected to miss any time. But Marty, this is a team that is 3-0, trying to go 4-0. So how do you manage a bone bruise on your knee while still playing at a high level?
Sure. Well, Sam Darnold was definitely a man of few words in that interview. And it was great, a collective sigh of relief and great news for Viking fans everywhere on this, let's call it a dream season so far. And not only for the team, the fans, but also for Sam Darnold himself. He had sustained a bone bruise, but on replay, he was essentially susceptible to any number of injuries in the knee, including ligament injuries, meniscus. He was hit from behind, below the knees, resulting in a penalty of roughing the passer, and thankfully he had no structural damage. Now, bone bruise is still very serious because the actual bone has more nerve endings than any other structure in the body, so pain is always an issue and can change from week to week. So Jalen Hurts dealt with that last season, wore a brace pretty much all season. But listen, Sam Darnold, can we say this? It's hard for me to say this. He has more touchdowns, leading touchdowns, and only one incomplete pass. Wow. I'll say wow.
Yeah, the Vikings trying to go 4-0, keep that perfect record alive against the Packers, which, by the way, is on CBS. Let's talk about reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. He's going to get an MRI on an injured foot or feet. He actually said it's some sort of ailment that's affecting both of his feet, so no surgery needed for now, but he also stated he might need some sort of procedure down the line. When you hear about some sort of injury like that, not a ton of information there, Marty, but what is your concern level?
Yeah, here's the issue with Myles. He's been dealing with injuries to both his feet since the preseason. And once you have injuries with the feet, you automatically develop what we call biomechanical issue. Essentially, how the body distributes shock from the game into the body is essentially dissipated first foot and ankle, then the shins, then the knee and the hip, and so on. But if the feet aren't doing their job, then all that shock goes upwards. Now he's having pain inflammation in both his shins. So this is the issue. Could he probably go through the season? Yes. Will he be dealing with treatment on and off inflammation every single week? Yes. But something will have to be decided on based on the MRIs of both feet, and more than likely he'll also MRI and image his shins. The muscle bellies of these tendons are in the shin, and as they extend into the feet, they go into the feet with all the various tunnels for the tendons.
And the Browns facing the Raiders on CBS on Sunday. Marty, we certainly appreciate it walking us through all of the injuries that we've seen as we're entering week 4 of the NFL. And just a reminder, we got you covered here on CBS Sports HQ all season long. Whether it's news, highlights, scores, make sure you stay locked in to CBS Sports HQ.